Even cross. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Laconia Conservation Commission meeting for February 17th, 2021. I'm Dean Anson.
Deb Williams.
Lisa Moore.
Michael Foot.
Ashley Ruprecht, Conservation Technician.
Okay, we're going to start the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under all, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so let's start the meeting. We're going to rearrange your schedule here, and let's start with Endicott Street. We don't want to tell you guys I want you to be home in time for dinner.
Trying to get me home early. All right.
Time is money.
Want me to jump right in?
Yes, sir.
My name is Jeff Lewis from North Point Engineering. This is Roland Manville, who's the owner and developer of the project. I do have copies of our site plan and grading plan up here. We're before you folks tonight because we have a site plan application accompanied by a conditional use permit application for impact to wetland buffer on this property, which is located at 224 Endicott Street. Roland is looking to develop it with two duplex buildings, so there'll be 4 total units on there with a driveway access off of Endicott Street. It's just over a 2-acre parcel that has not been developed previously. It was approved a number of years ago for a 12-unit development that never got built. We're only looking to build 4 units here, so it's substantially less than what was previously approved. We did obtain a special exception for the use from the zoning board last night, and will be to the planning board in March, looking for approval of our site plan application and the conditional use permit application. The property does contain 2 small pocket forested wetlands, kind of right in the middle of the property. The previous development was planning to impact those and at least fill the small one on the right. We're trying to work around them since we only have 4 units on the property. Roland thinks he can get the units placed nicely on the property, working with the topography, which does slope off towards the back, towards the north, and get these, all 4 units would be walkout homes on the north side of the units, and get it to work without needing to impact the wetlands. However, we do have the 50-foot City of Laconia setback around those wetland pockets, which we absolutely need to work in order to develop the lot. They take up just too much of the lot to try to get it to work. So we've come up with what we think is reasonable limits of work. You can see it does impact the wetlands. We have over 12,500 square feet of impact in the buffer area. We'd like to impact to get the units constructed as we have laid out here, which we think is the best opportunity on the site. We have been informed, I guess, that there's pending zoning changes going through the city right now for some amendment to the zoning that would potentially eliminate the need for the conditional use permit. That's what we've been advised by the planning department. However, that hasn't, I guess, passed. You folks probably know more about that than I do. But we are trying to get started on this project right now. Roland does have a driveway permit in place. He does have a building permit for the first building, so we can get started out there now. So we're coming to you folks, asking for your acceptance or recommendation on the conditional use permit for when we go to the planning board, hoping that we don't have to be delayed in getting to the planning board a few months waiting for this amendment, I guess, to pass through. We do have some drainage that comes onto the property. We have submitted a drainage report as part of the planning board application that I think made its way to you folks also. There is a drainage culvert that comes down Endicott Street right here, kind of dead center in the property. So there is a off-site watershed to the south that kind of comes through here, passes onto the property, and makes its way up to the northeast onto the adjacent properties. So that is one of the concerns of the area. It is a drainage way. One of the benefits of this plan is that we're making use of this front area here and some of this area within the wetland buffer for a stormwater management basin, which you can see on the grading and drainage plan. So we are capturing the water for the majority of the improvements on site, all of the units 1 and 2, all of the paved areas, the driveways, the shared driveways will drain into that detention basin where we'll manage the stormwater. And then we have a outlet overflow that continues on its way down its historic path. So we have prepared a comprehensive stormwater management report as part of the application, documenting what we normally do would normally do for a site plan application for any type of development, documenting the pre and post stormwater conditions, making sure that we're not increasing any runoff to the downstream properties. We are aware that there is some drainage problems experienced from the existing runoff downstream, so we don't want to add to that. So we have mitigated it for the development, and probably a little bit more in that we'll also be detaining some of the off-site runoff that comes under that culvert under the street. So hopefully there's a little bit of a benefit to the downstream neighbors drainage-wise. We don't have a lot of room there, so we're doing what we can, certainly managing our on-site stormwater, and then hopefully helping a little bit more with the drainage. But essentially, the wetlands, we did have a conditional use permit application. We had our wetland scientist from my office, Randy Shuey, has mapped the wetlands and provided the function and values assessment that was part of our conditional use permit application. They are low-value wetlands. There is no concern for any wildlife or native habitat out there. They are not vernal pools. They're pretty much in this 2-acre parcel that it's surrounded by development, it's surrounded by the road, and they are just pretty low-value pocket wetlands that don't seem to have any significant or high-value features. And we are leaving, a good portion of the buffer intact on the other side, certainly much more than the previously approved project would have. So that's basically it. I think we're looking for any feedback or recommendations you folks have and are planning on taking it to the planning board at their next meeting.
Okay, this is Stacy Susie, who just joined us.
Yep.
How, so you're leaving the buffer intact. What guarantee do we have from the homeowners that they'll leave the buffer intact? Is there like a homeowners?
There will be it's going to be a condominium, so there will be a condominium association. There will be common area there. So I would say that if there wanted to be a guarantee or a deed restriction or something like that, that'd be something we could entertain and talk to the planning board about as a conditional approval, if that's something that you folks were interested in.
I mean, I guess what I was thinking, I'm not thinking of, don't ever touch it, because you don't want it to be a mess and you don't want it to be a problem, but I would want it to stay vegetated and functioning as a green area with biomass.
I don't know what the amendment is proposing for that buffer. Is it that it won't apply to those wetlands, or?
There are currently 2 pending exemptions, and the one related to this particular proposal, the exemption is proposing that a wetland 3,000 square feet in total or less would be exempt from a buffer. Not to say that if it was actually impacting the wetland that it wouldn't need a CUP, because it would, but it would exempt it from needing the 50-foot buffer, and that's on the condition that it's not a vernal pool.
Yeah. So when that passes and gets enacted, then these 2 wetlands would not be subject to the 50-foot buffer. Well, that may not satisfy your concern.
I guess I was thinking about, or maybe it does. I was thinking about maintenance of it. So you were making it a selling point that you were being respectful of the area and that it was going to stay intact somewhat as a well, I'll call it a green space, but
Yeah.
And my question was, how do we know? And for me, what you're saying is, we're trying to impact as minimally as possible. We are seeing that, yes, we have to have some impacts, but we're trying to impact as minimally as possible. So once you leave that and we have homeowners, how do we know they're not gonna like, bring in the bulldozer, let's take care of that, it's low impact, there are bad wetlands anyway, let's make it clear, let's put up a ball field back there,
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say, is
Yeah.
I'd like to see that have still some functionality, even if those are just wet spaces,
Yeah.
that they're functioning as water uptake or storage.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have that problem with any residential development when if it's a standard subdivision and they went in to build the house there, they'd probably build the house and wouldn't even be before you folks. So I understand that concern. I'm not sure what guarantees we can offer for a homeowner not going in there. I mean, this project will have an association, so it won't be just like a single homeowner. In order to go in there and clear trees or do anything, they need 4 of them to all agree to do that. So I guess that'd be the only benefit
Well,
here, but.
I'm wondering if we, as a body, couldn't recommend some encumbrance on that, so that it
Yeah.
is in the site plan, or you would know better what the right location of that would be.
Yeah.
But that there be no further structure, building, or clearing only for maintenance of hazard trees or something. That's kind of what I'm concerned with. And I think we've done that in the past.
Yeah.
There's been a precedent where we could put some encumbrance on how that gets
Yeah,
managed.
you guys can certainly make the recommendation to incorporate it, say, in the HOA documentation,
Yeah.
or and certainly comments could be incorporated into the NOA, the notice of action that's provided
Okay.
when the planning board approves the project, so
Yeah. And-
whichever route you guys wanna.
Yeah, and I'll just, also, just to qualify, I'm also being sensitive to the fact that we have had a landowner, a butter landowner, be concerned about, water issues, so.
I think that's a good point. And we are required to submit the condominium document, association documents to the planning department for review once they're prepared. So that would be something that could be added as a condition of approval of the planning board application.
Thank you.
So I'm seeing here that you guys are calling a reduction of water after you put in your plan by a certain, you've already, by 0.21 cubic feet per second, which is negligible anyways.
Right. You're looking at the drainage
Right,
calculations?
so you've done a pre-drainage test on this. You have a proposed effect of what your plan is.
That's correct, yep.
On the north side of your plan, the straight lines going back, I don't see
Oh.
on this one. Yes,
Yeah, I should have pointed that out. So sorry. We do have municipal water and sewer to the development, but the sewer is actually coming from the development of, up
Ashley.
here. So it's coming cross-country through the back of the site. There's no sewer in Endicott Street for us to connect to. So we will have to come through up there for the sewer connection for both units.
There's no sewer that runs by right there, and I'm just curious.
Not in the street, right, yeah.
Interesting. So it comes from the
Ashley.
development above or below, to the north?
When Sundown was built, they actually put a manhole in specifically for this lot.
Right,
And it's deeded on our deed that we're able to go into that, which the building department has, because I do have a building permit for the first 1 and 2 unit building, which shows, my plot plan shows the sewer line going into that manhole, exiting into Sundown.
so you have city sewer, city water,
Correct.
reduces your densities. You're keeping it to the forefront without going out and building in the back.
Yeah, we thought this was the best thing to do for this lot. I owned this back in 2005 when I bought it off of Hillbilly Development, approved for 12 units. And then, at that time, I had like 4 different projects going on, 35 units, market crapped the bed. Mark Brady was my partner at the time, we decided to just get extensions for the next 2 years,
and then we just let it go. Rather than doing that, because what I found over the past 18 years is something small like this is gonna be more suitable for the neighborhood, it's gonna be better marketing value, you're gonna get a little more for the units. It's a less impact on the wetlands. Our first 12-unit project, this whole area was filled in. This was a parking area, if you guys were here that long ago. There was a roadway that came all the way around here, and this whole thing was filled in. This whole thing was filled in. So we're just trying to do the least impact, as well, but we need to make it nice, so we
So are you,
putting four, somebody last night at the meeting was saying, oh, you could put a road down the middle and put 2 units on each lot. We're not interested in that. We just wanna do 4 nice units, and, with the less impact we can do.
and these aren't being built for necessarily personal living, but as rentals,
No,
as is allowed in
no,
this
we're
area?
gonna sell them as condominiums, so I'll sell each individual unit to a buyer.
And they can do what they
Well, they'll
want,
have beach rights to Pendleton Beach, and,
for each unit.
for each unit, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're involved with the Sundown Association, so, we're not involved with them, but our deed, we use their beach, we pay our association, we're in their sewer, the whole thing, so it's a nice spot.
Are you going,
Go ahead.
are you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Decks, I see these things drawn as squares, but I don't see decks.
So,
Are you gonna have to be back here later, or are we gonna look
we
at
don't wanna be
decks?
back here later, it was suggested last night that we try to address that tonight if we can, because all of these units, all 4 of them have walkout basements, so there won't be a patio, there'll be a
Right.
patio on the lower level, but there'll be 8-foot 6x6s that go to a deck up to the top, so there'll be sonotubes 12 feet from this back foundation. So we probably should have showed 12 feet out sonotubes, because we will be disturbing that area.
Well, that would be within the disturbance we're looking for.
That is with the disturbance we're looking for, that's correct. So I wouldn't think that we would have to come back if they're in that disturbance.
I would just suggest, putting it forth
Okay,
at the front of it, so,
good idea, yeah.
So the wetland survey was done January last month?
No, it was done last summer, or, let me see, is it when we got there, September or
Yes,
August?
September, October.
Yeah. He was there in September.
We had done it years ago, and then when I had applied for my building permit, it was recommended that I get it redelineated because it had been so long.
yeah.
So we did do, and it did change a little.
What were the major changes?
Actually, I don't have.
It didn't change that.
No, it
I don't know
didn't
what
change
changed.
much at all.
I have the old plan.
The big one got smaller, and the small one got bigger.
They could have flowed downstream almost.
Yeah, look, it's hard to see.
So if you can actually see.
It's just a different, yeah.
It's a different plan, but if you look at this plan right here, this plan shows, sorry, this plan shows the original delineation,
Agendas.
Okay.
and then the dark one is Randall Shuey's delineation. So this one literally stayed the same. This one got smaller on one side and a little larger on this side.
Thank you.
Okay.
And your
But very insignificant.
sewer line crosses the wetlands boundary a little too? At the north end?
Right here,
Yeah.
we think we'll clear a little bit in there to get around the corner. That'd be ideal, yeah. And we could potentially sweep around wider to avoid that, but,
Is that for the sewer?
yeah.
The,
What,
the flooding or water issues that are on the lot now that drain down to adjacent property, is it a seasonal stream? Is there a way to,
It's not a seasonal stream.
where?
Yeah, I don't
how
know,
it
I'm
fall-
not sure where the
No, okay.
exact abutter is that has the problem. I know that there
Oh,
is
we got a
water that
copy
comes
of the
out here.
order.
There's a 12-inch.
It would be on the
It's-
northeast side, 84,
Yeah.
right about
So
in there. But
Towards
it's
this one.
negligible that it would have been from this property anyways, certainly
most of
looks
the water
like
that's
they
coming, most of the water that's coming there is coming through this culvert right here and going down there. There's not a defined stream, there's not a defined channel. I think it just finds its way in here, and it probably, some of it gets into one of these, two of these wetlands, but it ends up going down here. So it's gonna continue to do that. So whatever drainage problems they have,
Right.
we're not gonna exacerbate, but we're not going to solve either. The water needs to go where it needs to go.
So the culvert that goes under the road right now,
Yeah,
and it comes up on your side,
yeah.
what are you gonna do? I see that you have a drainage, but is that going to go under your road also?
Yeah, it goes under our, we have a detention base, small detention basin right here.
Right.
And then a culvert under our shared
Okay.
driveway right there. Another small detention basin. It's kind of one detention basin that's on both sides of our drive. And then a culvert here to send it on its way back down where it was going.
Is that,
Once the detention area is filled, it'll
Yeah.
proceed up.
and that pipe is big enough?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, this looks well engineered, actually, you know, if I'm looking at this off of January 6, 2021, it shows this culvert. It shows it crossing the road. You're not going to do anything about that. It's already on Route 3. It's given what it is for the lot, so they have a retention and then a slow drainage, which goes into the lower or eastern small wetlands.
So you know the addresses of the people who are concerned about the water though, right? It's here,
Was
it's
a letter-
84, yeah, 84 Ashley and 76 Ashley.
Ashley, those two
Mm-hmm.
back in the, yeah.
Just so I know where they are, am I correct by saying that
Well-
they're here?
Correct,
Yeah.
And they come off of Pendleton?
So
yes.
Also,
that
that
wouldn't even be us,
we
yeah.
don't show a topography that goes from here to their house, and their houses are pretty far down the hill.
so that wouldn't even be us, yeah.
This isn't even us, from here
Right,
down, it's just,
and I
it's just
concur with
water.
that.
It's just water that,
I concur with that, and that I looked at some of that, and there's some issues within that development itself that probably
more down this
weren't
end.
there. And there's an intermittent stream in there also,
On Sundown, there is a, water, I don't know what it's from, but
glaciers.
it could be their
Pesky
detention area
glaciers.
too, I don't know.
There's a big lake around here somewhere, I heard.
No, there is, yeah.
At the bottom of the hill.
Pretty nice, too.
So do you have a ballpark on what you're gonna charge for these?
Depends on how much.
Everything it'll carry, baby.
What?
That depends on how much Jeff charges. Yeah, we wanna be in the range of the mid to high fours. And we feel that we'll probably have them sold once we get started. Do you think they should be higher?
No,
I actually, you know, uniquely enough, being one on the pry out, one that's on the slide, it's like the eye of Sorn. I think you guys actually should take them for everything.
No.
stop.
No, we wanna be fair, but, they're gonna get a real nice unit.
Actually, in this area here, this is a fairly developed area. When you look up above it, there's already multifamily housing. This would be less impact. It looks good on the road. You know, I try and think about rotating units 3 and 4, just not to impact so much. But given the level of the drainage and stuff that you've submitted tonight, I certainly think that you guys have looked at this well.
All right, thank you, Mr.
I know you said that they were gonna have beach rights. Are there dock rights also?
That beach has day docking. I don't know much about it because I'm not able to go on it because I don't have one. But they have tennis courts, they have bathrooms, they got They pay somebody to rototill that beach every week. It's a very nice spot. And yes, they have day docking, so how that works, I'm not real sure. I know there's some moorings out there too. So I don't know if it's a lottery that you have, but you can't leave it there overnight anyway.
Got
It's just
you.
day docking.
Okay.
So not really sure how many boats can get docked. And that, if you know where it is, it overlooks the houses on Governor's Island. Beautiful spot over there.
It's an association.
Yeah.
I thought I had seen it when I looked at it earlier.
In the
So your erosion control map, what is
construction
that
details,
like?
maybe?
That's a fabric you put on the surface?
The erosion control mat?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wherever we have slopes. It's just for slope stability for the grass to be able to grow.
That's after
Better.
it's seeded, correct?
Huh?
After it's seeded.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just where we have some steeper slopes that we don't want to erode if it rains while the vegetation's establishing it.
We tend to like silt socks instead of the silt fence.
Yep, they're interchangeable for us, so if that'd be another good recommendation. I don't know if you have a preference, yep. We see a lot of people going that way.
Yeah.
We consider them interchangeable.
We actually like them too because the sock's gonna erode after a certain period of time. The fence I gotta take down.
Right.
Assuming it doesn't blow down.
Well, if you put upright, it stays up for a little while.
Labor
Believe it or not, from 2005, there's some fence still up over there.
That is surprising. Do you have an idea of how many trees you'll be taking down?
Well,
So-
the trees have actually been cleared. It was cleared in 2005, and then when I got my building permit for these two units, I didn't clear anything. All I did was I had a company come in and re-grub everything that was cleared before. So everything that's cleared is basically cleared, minus maybe some for my roadway to come into the other building.
Oh.
So there'll be very minimal trees coming down right now.
But there, maybe, did I misunderstand, but there are standing trees in the back where you were talking about?
Back here on my lot line, yes.
And how far do they extend into the property?
I don't really know. When we cleared this, or I won't call it clear, we grubbed it
Yeah,
in the spring. We did not take any trees down. All we did was re-grub everything that we cleared when we were originally gonna start.
what I'm trying to get to is if we make that suggestion as we wrap up tonight and somebody makes a motion and we make that
Oh, you're talking
suggestion.
about over here?
No, I was talking about, I thought what the progression of the discussion was that you weren't gonna be impacting any of the vegetation towards the back. And I was saying, yeah, but once you leave, somebody else could. And I was trying to conserve the vegetation in the back for a couple of reasons. One being to uptake water, excess water, to kind of, not dry out the wetlands, but to create a
Put couple weeping
sponge
willows
there.
back there, yeah.
a sponge, and also to, for the people who are abutting you, even though there's some discussion about whether you are contributing to their water issues or not, that might assist them. And so now I'm hearing maybe there's no vegetation
No,
back
no,
there.
good. You are absolutely right. So, way back when, this was not a 50-foot buffer, I believe it was a 35-foot buffer. So we weren't able to penetrate anything inside that buffer. So anything that was penetrated before is grubbed, but all them trees are still inside that buffer area.
Okay,
Well, right, for the most part. The small wetland, they were filling, so they had a permit to fill that, so that.
Yeah, actually, you're correct about that. This was cleared originally because we were filling this at the other permit.
okay.
So in terms of stands of trees right now, I don't know what's out there. The intent, obviously, we're not clearing anything more than what we've shown here, and that would just be allowed to revegetate and regrow. But in terms of established stands right now, there's probably not a lot out there.
Yeah, and to Lisa's point, the less trees you take down, the less water problem you're gonna have
Yeah,
downhill.
yep.
You're gonna do your neighbor a favor.
And you're gonna reseed after the sewer line is dug?
Yeah, anything that's disturbed for construction will have to be reseeded. And we do have a street tree requirement too, so we'll be working with the planning department to supplement, once we know what we have for trees out in the frontage and the clearing is done, we'll be supplementing with additional street trees too.
I did see a note that said that any other plantings are up to the homeowner, so.
Around the foundation?
Yeah, that would be for like plantings around the units. They'll have limited common areas around the unit where they can do landscape, shrubbery or plantings. But any of the trees that we're putting in will be part of the planning board approval and part of the infrastructure improvements.
And we could provide you with a list of some native plantings,
Yeah.
and some plantings that might be good around your retention area
Yeah,
to help.
yep,
with
absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't, I agree with that, Deb, I'm just wondering,
What?
well, I'm wondering about the back. I'm still stuck on that a bit.
They could put a gazebo, the association could choose to build a common gazebo back there, right, and have a fire.
Well, I'm saying I would rather see it be used as an area to,
It's hard pressed
Have
to tell
green.
people what to do.
that's why we brought it up, talking about the homeowners association and putting something in
Yeah.
their governing documents.
True on.
But also have to think that anybody that's gonna do anything there should and will, and get in trouble if they don't, is pull permits for anything that they do, which would trigger, if you pull a permit, it would go to, Amanda?
Ashley.
We'll go to Ashley and say, oh, this is in our wetland area, this is what you have to do. And that's why we have that. And actually, that's why I had to get mine redelineated, because when I filed for my building permit, it showed we were
Right,
close to that, so she wanted to make sure that where we were.
right.
But if the exemption does get passed, it wouldn't be triggered because the wetlands are not greater than 3,000 square feet.
Nice.
So in that case, I'm not sure that it's a.
Yeah.
With that. Dean, do you have any questions?
The question I have is, are you gonna put fences around these, retention basins?
No. They're not deep enough, or we'll have enough standing water to warrant fences.
3 feet?
Yeah, there won't be 3 feet of standing water in them,
And it goes 3 feet, but it goes big to small, it's not like 3 foot hole.
We won't have fences around them, no.
It's a fairly rocky knoll.
Which would right there.
Generally in there,
Mhm.
as it drops off.
I was just thinking about it from a safety standpoint, that if you have young kids running around, you don't want them to drown in here.
Yeah, no, that's something we always take into consideration. If we're expecting to be, they're not expected to be wet detention ponds, so they'll be dry when it's not raining. That's the intention of them, is to freely drain. So if they were gonna be wet basins or wet ponds or something, then we would wanna fence them. We would, yeah, so we don't want something like that in here. They're just kind of pocket areas, to help slow down the water so that we know we're not, contributing to any drainage problems that may be experienced downstream. But I wouldn't see any reason to need to fence them for safety issues.
Can we? Given the size of the storms we've had lately, and if this is a rocky knoll, as Mike said, my concern would be that from a safety standpoint of some kid getting in there, playing around, trying to catch frogs and stuff, that's what I would be doing. And if you don't know how to swim,
Dean, I must interject here. I had my insurance company call me up and inform me I had a pond in my backyard, and I said yes. And they asked me what I was
Really?
going to do about it. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, what are you suggesting, that I put a fence around a 17-acre pond? I really am just going to jump in here and say that they offer swimming lessons at Weirs Beach during the summer. How deep is a frog pond? Knee deep, knee deep, knee deep, knee deep.
Ribbit.
Ribbit.
Okay, what I was gonna suggest is that you put in the condominium docs that in the event that you have significant standing water here, the homeowners put in a fence.
I'm gonna change the subject to just, is it,
Sure,
are you?
that's fine.
So, I'm still ruminating on my vegetation. So if we don't have significant vegetation along the boundary line, and I'm looking at the sewer water lines going through the back anyway, so you don't necessarily want big trees sitting on top of that. And you've said that you're going to let the wetland areas revegetate naturally. Probably then might want to have a consideration for invasive species management in the homeowner's
Yeah,
agreement, or whatever.
concur.
And maybe,
You don't wanna see it revegetate in autumn olive. You'd rather see,
Bittersweet.
cattails, spice.
yeah, and there's other things that don't necessarily have to, that aren't,
So what we have is, we have, you know, on larger projects with stormwater infrastructure, we have inspection and maintenance agreements, operation and maintenance agreements, I&M, O&M, and have language in there for invasive species, maintenance and taking care of that stuff. So what we could do is provide you with some of that standard language and like inspection checklist that they just do to incorporate into the to the condo association, that the planning board that would be easy to do. You're basically setting the homeowners association up to say, hey, these are things you need to look for. On this one, it'd be very simple. They need to go out, you know, once a year and check and make sure the culverts aren't clear, aren't clogged up, right? So that the water's not gonna pond up in there.
Perfect.
Check the outlet, make sure there's no erosion, and do the invasive species, know what to look for invasive species. And if there needs to be, you know, they may have sediment from the road. I'm sure the road gets sanded and that may end up in their basin, so it needs to be shoveled out every so often so that that thing doesn't fill up. So that's normal stuff that we can incorporate into
okay.
the condo association.
Yeah. Just because I'm curious, are the lots across the street still cleared? I haven't been up there for a little while.
I haven't been up there either.
There's a aerial photograph on page
Oh, thank you.
39.
Thank you.
I don't know the date on the photograph, but
The only other lots that I know up there were the ones, that 29 acres. that
2020.
Jennings was doing all the site work on. That's been abandoned almost as long as mine.
Yeah.
is that the gardens?
No.
No. Yeah, it looks like there's a road system across the street from you. Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Oh, you know what? That's the Governor's Crossing across
Yeah.
the street. Yeah.
They're still building that out.
Still building.
Thank you.
There's lots going on over there. Good, it's a developer joke. Lots going on.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, anything else?
Do you want me to recap what we have?
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
So the recommendation for silt socks over silt fencing, providing a planting list of native plantings for landscaping, and for the HOA docs incorporating information for invasive species management, the stormwater control device, inspections, regular maintenance, and, so do we wanna put in the HOA, the condition for the current buffer to be maintained in its.
It doesn't
natural-
sound like there's a buffer there, so that's why I
That's
kind
what I
of,
wasn't sure if you wanted me to put it in.
I don't want to force them to plant stuff, you know, I mean, so I guess I'm,
Just leave it off.
Actually, I know one before that, with the maintenance.
Yeah.
There is a typical maintenance agreement that the association will have to do, like we were gonna put in a say we put in a grinder pump, or we put in a leaching field or something like that, there would be, in an association, there would be a maintenance agreement that we would put in there that they would be responsible for doing.
Yeah, I know
And if the town had to do it, then the association would be responsible for paying.
Yeah, I know it is typically like standard language for maintenance of catch basins and whatnot, is making sure that it's
Yeah.
taken care of on the private property and that it's not, it ends up being a responsibility of the city to go out and like maintain these
Right.
stormwater
That's fine.
catchment systems, because it gets very tricky.
I don't wanna make it too difficult or too, like, this could, pretend you're the homeowner and your attorney's reading the condo docs and there's something in there about endangered species or this and that. We wanna keep it simple, but we want them to know that there is a maintenance program.
Something that says
have to-
plan, something that says plan, I don't read.
I think that'd be, just, it's having we'll come up with something for you that's
Okay.
acceptable, that I think the planning board will.
This is a bulleted list of
Yeah.
recommendations that I put together in a memo I'll provide to you after this meeting, and it goes to planning
Yeah.
board that just says
So-
that Conservation Commission
Yeah.
reviewed the application, voted to support, not support the application, here are some conditions and recommendations, so, those are the 3 points that I had so far, and not to say that we're gonna,
Yeah, no,
Jeff
I
will
get
be
it.
able to help you out and
Yep.
just,
I
it's more of a
appreciate it.
broad level, okay, making sure that you have these elements incorporated.
So the question I have is, how much of this is going to be lawn?
I think that what I'd expect is the area that you see, that we're showing as limits of clearing would be all area that be, I consider lawn, loamed and seeded lawn and mowed. So anything within, on this side of our limits of clearing, right here, would end up being lawn or maintained as a mowed area. Where is this now? Well, anything inside of our limits of clearing, which is our limits of impact within the, so they have a yard, they still need to mow to some extent for the, keep the sewer clear.
Well, the sewer's underground, so there's only 2 cleanouts that you have to have access to. So this should be the line back of the buffer where this should be maintained, and the rest can grow.
That's, all right, yeah, it'll grow.
Yeah.
You'll wanna maintain, you wanna keep the whole sewer line, you don't want trees growing up in the sewer line, so.
No.
So you'll wanna keep a strip like that, like mowed,
Yeah.
but you don't need to mow all the rest of it.
No.
I guess what I would like to see in the condo docs is a diagram that shows where the wetlands are and where the wetland buffers are, so that the homeowners know what they can and cannot do in those areas.
Yeah, that's doable. The site plan would be referenced in the condo docs anyway, so it would be, it'll be in there. I guess my question for you folks, and maybe I should have asked this at the beginning, is, we obviously have concerns over keeping vegetation around the wetlands, but what is the concern relative to the 50-foot buffer that may be going away 30 days from now on this plan? Is that a concern? Is that something that the conservation is supporting, that amendment to the zoning, or not? No?
So I guess the question I have is, you know, a precursor to that. In the event that the wetland buffer goes away, and we give Jeff and Roland our blessing on this plan, does our blessing essentially disappear? So, here it is, it's the 17th of February. We have certain buffers right now. And that's what the plan, that's what our review is based on. And if the buffers change in the future, do these buffers disappear, or are they still gonna be there? Because in February of 2021,
I can provide an opinion on that. My opinion would be that they would disappear if the zoning ordinance changes. I mean, they'd be in effect for the site plan approval, anything associated with what we're proposing now. If someone at a future date, the association came out and said, hey, we want to do something else within this 50-foot buffer, and the buffer's no longer existed in your ordinance, then they wouldn't need a conditional use permit. They need a building permit or whatever else they need, but they would not need to come back to you folks just because the 50-foot buffer was shown on this plan. However, if you tie the condominium association to this buffer and this plan, then that could create another whole set of problems. So that, I guess that's just my reason for my question is how concerned are you about this buffer? Because we're not going to do this, but we could postpone our application for a month or two and then come back to the planning board, and we wouldn't even need to, my understanding is we wouldn't even need to come see you folks because there would be no buffer. We don't want to do that. We want to move forward, and we're absolutely willing to keep the buffer that we can keep there.
And I
And to
think all
Roland's
the
point, he doesn't wanna-
recommendations that you're making should go to the planning board. And
Correct.
if in fact at that time they still need them, then they're gonna use them. And if not, then they'll take some and leave some. I think you have to do your job right now as it sits because that's not in order.
Yeah,
And the intent of the exemption isn't to open this gate for starting to see all of these wetland buffer impacts. It's supposed to be an avenue for residents and for wetlands to meet in the middle somewhere. So when you have a 200 square foot, which is the wetland on
yeah.
the right-hand side, and a, what is it, less than a 1,200 square foot wetland that are isolated, and yes, they do have a function, I'm not going to say that they don't, but they are low functional wetlands. So rather than constraining applicants to a 50-foot buffer and saying hands off, it's supposed to give an avenue to, this is honestly the like a poster child case
Perfect
for what
example.
we wanna see for when and if this exemption goes through, what sort of application would fit that 3,000 square foot exemption?
Okay, so the reason I'm asking the question is because I live in a condominium association where the reverse happened. I bought my house was built, there was no buffer. I went to put a porch on where I had a deck. I would take the deck off, put the porch on essentially the same footprint. And because there was now a 50-foot buffer, I had to get a conditional use permit.
Correct.
So I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it from one end of the spectrum, you're looking at it from the other end.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the other direction, it wouldn't apply unless there was some deed restriction or something imposed on the property that enforced an old regulation, But otherwise, it's gonna be the current regulation's gonna rule. Just like in subdivisions, all the time, we see subdivisions with two-acre lots with a 20-foot setback and a 10-foot setback, side setback shown on the plan, but if the zoning changes to a 50-foot, then it becomes a 50-foot, or vice versa. Doesn't matter what's on the subdivision.
Yeah,
Well-
and Jeff, you explained it really well, so thank you.
Yeah.
The comments made tonight aren't magically gonna be invalid, say that exemption goes through. It's not that it wasn't worth making the comment. Obviously, if you decide to put certain things within the HOA documentation or deed restriction, it's tighter knit than in terms of a CUP approval that may not be representative anymore if the 50-foot buffer is no longer.
I was curious as to what happens to our comments. We got this buffer, and the zoning changes. Our comments are moot
You know what?
around the wetland buffer.
I wouldn't quite go there, but I do think what we're going to see in Laconia over the next little bit here is a discussion on densities. Now, these guys say, oh, this was approved for 12 units before. And I go to myself, I'm like, 12 units, well, how big is a unit? Well, it turns out in the definitions, there are no physical dimensions for a unit. So it's restrained by open space, steep slopes, or zoning areas, you know, commercial, resort, shorefront, residential. And that's at least my understanding. I could be corrected here, because I had to ask questions twice as a kid. But that is generally what the constraint is on what size a unit is here. To me, this looks like a good project for it. I have a fairly good understanding. I think that this, you're going to see more infill on lots that haven't developed. And I do like the point of a certain size of these wetlands, being as they're not vernal pools or anything like that. And you'll find that in this area for the city of Laconia and growth, it'll be better because it'll be better utilized what we only have so much space.
I'll just add to that, the comments so far that have been made are related to a silt sock use, which we would have anyone building, regardless of whether or not you're next to a wetland, that's part of the building permit process. Another comment about the landscaping using native plantings, also good and valid. I don't think that that goes away, whether or not there's a buffer. You don't want people planting Japanese knotweed. And then the HOA stuff would be tied to the HOA rather than the NOA of the planning board and notice of action for the planning board approval to the application. It'd be more tied to the actual homeowners association. So I don't think that necessarily comments made are moot if the exemption goes through.
No, I was referring to my comment about in the condo docks delineating the wetland buffer. That's a moot point.
Well, no, that'll be in there because it has to go into the master plan, which will be recorded at the registry of deeds, and it will show exactly what is shown here. It'll show your wetland buffer, it'll show the wetlands, it'll show the houses, it'll show limited common area, it'll show common area. It does show all that, and that's like the Bible of the condo association.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, so I know you've tried this twice. Why don't you give us the rest of the comments? I won't ask any more comments.
Did you want me to recap them?
Please.
Oh, okay. So the silt sock over silt fencing, the native landscaping plantings, and incorporating language about invasive species management, the management of stormwater control devices into the HOA documentation.
Okay, do we want to put anything in about fertilizers?
Yes?
Yes?
Phosphorus? No phosphorus?
No phosphorus.
You want that in the HOA or in the NOA?
It should go in the HOA, I think.
Okay.
And I want to say as a presentation tonight, the amount of information you guys have here
Don't forget your.
makes it a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, I second that.
You know, so I want to
Very
give you
complete.
kudos on that. If I was asking questions on a two-dimensional piece of paper yesterday, at least.
Yeah, it was a little difficult yesterday, but well, that's because I've never done it before, but it went pretty well, actually.
Yep, absolutely.
I just wanted to say too, I'm a member of the Conservation Commission in Concord, so I really appreciate you folks, and your questions are all spot on. We deal with the same type of things, and these residential communities make it so difficult with these small pocket wetlands or cluster subdivisions even for us, so I know where you're coming from.
I'll make a motion that we accept the plans as we see them with our suggestions and comments included.
Second.
Okay. Any additional comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good
For your
night.
time.
Okay, so let's get back to the agenda.
You want a hand with that? You
If I say no,
You
it's gonna
refused
break.
last
I
time
was
and it
gonna
fell over.
I can't see Lisa, but
Oh dear, that's not a problem. Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks again.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the January 20th, 2021 minutes. Anybody have any comments?
I'll move we accept the minutes as presented.
A second?
Okay, anybody have any comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Right?
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so now we have 538.
So this was an application, the DES permit, 538 Shore Drive. I sent that out, high priority, just letting people know if you had a comment, let me know, and I would send it to DES. Deb chimed in and had a comment about the brush removal, or shrub removal along the shore, so I, after the period closed of comments, I put that on a memo and I sent that out to DES, so that's the second attachment there under the documents.
Mhm.
Thank you, Deb.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we don't have to take any action on that, right? It's already been taken.
Already done. All set.
Okay,
Thank you, efficient staff.
thank you, Ashley. Okay, so we have the rules of administrative procedures. Any additional comments on this? Anybody look at it?
I know it's been a while,
It's been a while.
and it was on the to-do list of things to do, and then the ordinance changes came up, so I put that on the back burner, and now that those are through, it's kind of revisiting it. But the only change from the last revision was the membership change, since
Yeah.
the board has gone from 7 members to 5 members with 3 alternates. So that's the only change from the last revision, but I know it's been a while since you guys have looked at it.
Sounds like something we should do.
It seems pretty straightforward.
I'm not seeing anything that says we have to take up arms against the
British?
British, as it were. Couldn't lose a finger there.
That's in the fine print.
It'll be it. If we take up against the British, it'll be iced tea.
Size 3 font, upside down. Yeah.
I've seen that stuff. I got fed that to me last night at the ZVA meeting.
Did you? Wow.
No surprises in here.
Okay,
It's pretty dry.
okay, so we have to approve this?
Yeah, if you guys want to adopt the rules of procedure.
There's no, we have to meet on midnight under the
Full moon?
full moon or anything like that. I'm good to go.
I move we adopt the rules and procedures as presented on February 17th, 2021.
I will second that. Oh, every third full moon.
So who's gonna determine if it's a full moon?
I mean, I vaguely remember us talking about we can amend them if something comes up and we have to. I
Sure,
mean, it's
but it
like-
should be adopted,
Yeah.
that we should absolutely give Ashley the ability to go
Yeah.
forth to her
Uh.
group and say, look, I got them to do something.
Yeah,
Okay, so, anybody have any comments? We've had it's,
Thank you, Ashley,
There's a
for putting this
motion.
together.
No
That's
problem.
my comment.
it's been moved and seconded, yeah.
yeah. So, anybody have any comments?
Who's the member of the city council that's supposed to be?
It's vacant.
Ah.
So someone from city council could act as a liaison if they wished.
They have a
Okay.
hard time showing up for the master steering plan, so I wouldn't hold your breath. Is that on film?
Even, do any of them do Zoom at all? I mean, even if they, wow.
I think
Well-
all of the.
But I'm not bitter.
Oh, don't go there. Moving right along.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so, any comments?
Doesn't sound like it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nice, good, thank you.
Oh, we're so get-along types.
Okay, so now we have the Pearly Pond. Oh my God, how do I get out of here? Pearly Pond.
Back to the,
Okay, so, Ashley, any changes from the last time we got this on the Pearly Pond?
So,
The
I
planting.
think most of, I don't know if Mike, you were here, but was everyone here for Scott's present? Scott and, RFS came to talk about the engineering and the plans.
and the digging out and everything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, okay, yeah, you were here. So this is
Missing.
just in response to that meeting about requesting the Conservation Commission to have, you know, provide landscaping information or maintenance of the property. So I had put together a preliminary timeline, which is the second attachment. I know we're already in
Yeah.
February, and I know the ground's frozen too, so in terms of like soil sampling, there are other things that need to be considered here. I just wanted to kind of give us some framework. And I have talked to Dean about this, and it seemed like rather than spending the next like 9 months to, to do it, kind of just hatching it out and.
So wait a minute, which Dean are you talking about?
You.
Oh, okay.
You had said, I know we had talked about it, and you were gonna like watercolor paint a plan. He was like, I'm gonna watercolor and draw up a landscaping plan. He's gonna get out his
Sounds right.
plans. He was gonna go crazy with it.
Call Larry Freights.
And then you were kind of like, I don't know if we should do it that way, if we wanna just stop overthinking it and buy a bunch of bulbs, have Marnie separate her perennials, and do a little soil testing, and then go from there and volunteer. So it's really in your hands. I just wanted to come up with some sort of framework of, okay, it's March, let's talk about these things, let's try to get the ball moving.
Well, I'm thinking that it's coming right up on the Belknap County, bulb, tree, and brush sale, so.
Well, that was part of the thing, this information I had given Dean was one of the companies that I work with for wetland plants. I mean, I still think it's a good idea to do some sort of soil sample. I think that your turnaround time on purchasing something, you could still do that and still take a soil test when it's a little bit more conducive to do so. And get some fleshy tuber type stuff in there that's not gonna grow high. You could also do the irises that Dean was thinking of, and get some stuff in there. And that could happen by the middle of May.
It doesn't have to wait till August and when it's parched. It's a pond.
Okay, so I talked to,
Well, it more so has to do with construction.
That's
Oh,
right.
Don't wanna
Sorry,
plant before they go out there and
Ignorant.
start digging.
sorry.
And and that's what I'm just looking, you're saying,
okay, but let me,
sure,
okay, so I talked to Scott Myers. I talked to Amy Levisick. And I asked for, essentially their opinions on what they would like to see. Amy said, keep it simple so that, because I said, well, we could put rocks along the side of between the pond, edge of the pond being here and the rocks being in front of it, so that, you know, that area was planted, and then and she said, please don't put rocks, because
Kids will throw
it's a
'em in.
pain for her to have to trim around.
Oh, yeah.
So just, you know, scrap the rocks, and I was like, okay. So I talked to Scott, and I suggested that we, you know, I asked him when he thought they would be doing the construction. He said, I don't know if we're going to do the construction. So I said, well, what if we kept it simple? I mean, because my initial idea for a watercolor was, and I sent it to Ashley, I said, this is what Monet's gardens look like. How about if we do something like this? And Scott, you know, apparently didn't think that was a good idea. So, so it was, I contacted the company that Lisa sent me to about irises, because we can get native irises and plant them around the pond, and they would probably spread and forego the construction, the digging of the trench and and, you know, because we could do all this by hand. And, you know, we would, you know, do what Lisa said and get some soil samples. And so, anyway, so when I suggested to Scott that we just keep it simple and plant some irises and some other low-growing vegetation that can add some color to it, he said, sounds good.
And the truth is, if they decide to go ahead with the construction, you haven't lost that much money. I mean, I'm not trying to, you could always replant again.
The irises cost $1.10 a corm for 100 of them. So it would be $110. Now, we don't have to plant 110 or 100.
Sure.
We can plant whatever number we want. We could plant 20 and see if they survive, and if they do, then we
But
can
it-
plant some more next year.
How do you guys feel about tiger lilies? Is that invasive, or is that too
No?
much of a
daylily?
gardeny thing?
Well, I was gonna say, like, the Turkish, that there is like something called like a Turkish cap, which is more of a native. There's some beetles that are kind of attacking lilies too.
The daylilies?
Well, not so much daylilies, but the other thing is if you want.
Asian lilies are what they attack.
Yeah, but there's some, but anyway, I guess what I was saying was, if you were looking for native, natural looking, probably the Turkish caps are the only thing that you might find native, like in our woodlands. The other stuff is more hybrid, I think.
I tell you, you find buttonbush naturally also.
Well, but, yeah, but
They call that odd
buttonbush
against
is odd.
this particular pearly pond.
Oh,
Well, I think we want to keep it under 3 feet tall.
No, I understand. I'm just
And,
saying,
and
let's,
without having to maintain it.
so it sounds like we got it planned in. It sounds like we're gonna go ahead and do something in the spring with inexpensive plants. And if somewhere along the line they decide they're gonna do the construction, so be it, and we'll replant later.
So
Yeah.
we don't know if they're gonna do it now?
So the city council has to vote on whether to spend the funds on it, and while the Conservation Commission does have a portion of the budget to spend on the plantings, I'm not so sure about doing the plantings before the work takes place.
wouldn't.
I
Well-
think that there might be a conflict there in terms of.
I only meant if we didn't know if they were gonna do the
Right.
construction. If we know for sure,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wouldn't
when-
do it.
When Scott was here, he did not have an estimate of the cost. And that was going to be, you know, the thing that drove the decision.
so we have another month maybe before we have to make a real decision on this, it sounds
I'll
like.
get an update and see when or if it's going to go to city council for a vote, because my understanding was that they did have a pretty good idea on the cost estimate, it's just trying to figure out if now.
like if they,
now-
like if the family who insists upon the maintenance of it wants to,
Yeah. if they're gonna spend the money now versus maybe holding off a year or 2 years, or don't do it at all and maybe only do, cause I think the swale component was the most expensive, so they had said, well, maybe we just do the cutting of the woody vegetation, which would, they cut the woody vegetation, then plant the irises, and then 3 years later down the line, they decide to do the swale. I'm
Right.
not sure. It sounds like,
That was,
depends on what they're willing to spend at this time and whether they will section it off or just say no altogether. But I'll get an update because it has been,
yeah, because when I
Little bit of
talked to
time.
Scott, he was talking about just maintaining by trimming the woody vegetation along the road and then planting, these irises that could add some,
There's woody vegetation on the backside along with a rock and everything else, and you don't wanna get involved in all of that, you know what I mean? Whatever
Back
it
is
is out in
okay.
the
Back
front
is-
of the road, however they want it, I say they should contribute to the upkeep if that's what their pressure is.
It would be nice if we could delineate the area that we want to grow. I just picture Parks and Recs cutting everything down, so,
There'd be no loss, in toto, there'd be no loss, and truly,
well, if they're cutting irises, yeah, it would.
the next season they'll come up again.
I think from talking to Amy, if she's.
Whether there
if
was a
we-
stake or, I don't know,
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. If we delineate what we want cut, what we don't want cut, Amy is fine with it. As long as we, don't put rocks so that she
Right.
has to trim around the rocks. Because I thought that the way that it looked last summer was, it was well maintained by Parks and Rec.
Well, it had quite a swath of nothing. I mean, there was an opening to that the shoreline there that was quite wide, I thought, was over generous for that small body of water was what I thought, but, I mean, I could have just driven by after they just did it.
I think one of the things that drives this, and I'll go right to the Ward 1 city councilor, is this imagination how things used to be, where the sky was bluer, the snow crystals were whiter and larger, and the ice was harder and more amenable to skating. What is there now on the south side is truly a forest of something, trees that are evergreens that are about 50 feet tall, shading the pristine pond, and so the fantasy of skating on it, unless you're going to start making a well-maintained skating rink, is somewhere beyond the belief of the puddle that it is.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
say go right across the street to Opeachy and it's,
yeah.
Maintained.
cleared right there, yeah.
Yeah, so if you want that fantasy, it's available right down there at the local thing. Otherwise, we're maintaining a wet spot,
Right.
which is fine, cause we're all about wet spots in the world. Me and a turtle and a salamander don't even get me going.
Yeah.
But for having it as what, the imagination of what might have once been is not the reality of it now.
And that kind of ties in with what I was thinking too, Mike, in terms of inviting people to come visit it and, fish in it and all this other stuff. I just kind of felt like it didn't need to be that.
Oh, man, I missed Derby weekend. All I needed was a bomb house out there and a drill. I could have gone for that.
Until the
Okay,
UM
all right.
falls on you.
So, not to cut the levity short, but Lord knows I like levity. So why don't we do this? Ashley, why don't you see what the current status is, or I'll call Scott and see whatever you want to do.
I'll check in on
Okay, good.
what's going on.
Perfect.
All right, great. Then we'll postpone any activity on this. Lisa, if we were gonna order irises, let's just keep it at irises, we'll make it simple here. When would we have to do it?
So let me call the company and see.
Well, if you're gonna call the company, I can call the company.
Well, my understanding is there's a spring season. I don't know how much of a fall season they're doing. I don't know if COVID's affected their operations. I mean, my my understanding is that you can get wetland plants most of the growing season, but irises in particular, I think it's more springtime, but I would need to check with them.
Okay, but, all right, so I would be thinking about planting in the spring.
Correct.
But let's check, let's double check, because they
Yeah.
might have
I'll-
other.
I'll check them, okay. Okay. Okay, next item is the NRI.
Now, this link here to this taking action for wildlife doesn't work on this screen right here.
Once you click the email and then you click
Cannot
the-
browse.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can't browse it.
Oh, man.
This,
Well, if you do click that link from home,
Correct.
it can bring you to the Taking Action for Wildlife
no, it's
website.
just
And
these things.
they have the most comprehensive site I've seen regarding NRIs. I mean,
They've done a lot of
searched
work
high and
on
low, but they have it all in one place. Me and Dean Squared and I, met with Amanda Stone from Taking Action for Wildlife on January 28th. We had a Zoom call just to discuss, what our goals are, what we're looking to do. And so some takeaways were that, we have a very solid NRI right now. A lot of those things will likely not change because like geomorphic
Yeah.
data, wetland data will change a little bit, but not all too much. So basically what we have for general NRI is good. It does need to be updated and brought into the world of 2021. But she had said that that process could really be done in-house, and in terms of looking for like external additions that will really amplify the NRI or provide more insight, it would be putting funding towards a study that would go, say, in the appendices of the NRI, like a scenic road analysis or a wetland study, very comprehensive wetland study where there's, more data for people going out and doing in-field studies and identifying, say, prime wetlands. So rather than having basically more comprehensive things that tie into the NRI, that's the general NRI. She did say that, because I had been looking at different grant sources, and she had said that the Moose Plate grant isn't really used as often, hasn't been really giving out that much towards funding NRIs in recent years, and did make a good point that current use funds could potentially be used. She had seen that happen, so money that's generated from people taking their lands out of current use, the money goes to the city for buying conservation easements. It could be a potential source if we may want to use that money towards updating the NRI or getting a additional appendicee.
Do we know how much money is in the NR, in the,
I don't. I can check though.
okay.
I'll have to ask finance.
It's, Ashley, bringing it up into 2021 means updating software, like upgrading the,
I would say that we're not going to just get rid of the old NRI. It's not going to be gone forever. It will always be referenced, but even reading through it myself, I'm like, why is this organized like this? In the very first paragraph, they start talking about the history of Native Americans. And like, you didn't even tell me what an NRI is. And I'm reading the NRI, I'm reading this in-depth history explanation of Laconia. I'm not saying that it's not good information. It is. But the document really needs some TLC and some rework to make it more.
okay, so
Like-
it's not just a technology upgrade, it's more than that, okay.
It's really, I would say, a lot of the grunt work will just be me doing like borderline English rework of like making it,
Yeah,
in the very first paragraph, there's, they have the same sentence twice that says the elevation of Laconia is at 505 feet. There's another sentence, the elevation is at 505 feet. I'm like, how do you miss that? Like, there's just, so there's just some.
They walked away,
It's not a
came
big
back.
deal.
Yeah, 2 AM, who knows? Yeah.
It just needs a little bit of, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
like
So
I'm not an English professor or anything, but just reading it, I'm like,
it's not readable,
there's typos.
not use.
When they cite their source, they have like 5 different ways that they're doing that, like last name, comma, Roman numeral page, the letter P dot page. It's more of like
Now,
grammatical.
So that the purpose of the conversation with Amanda was to find out how we should do this. And one of the critical questions that Ashley asked was, who owns
The NRI?
the NRI? And Amanda was clear. She said, we do. Because Ashley said, well, if I use this paragraph, do I have to go back and reference them? And Amanda said, no, it's yours.
Right.
Right?
As I'm going through it, and I'm going to be using exact
Ah.
language, I didn't want to be caught plagiarizing because, and have to use quotation marks and cite the Laconia 2009 NRI. So it's like, how am I doing this? Because that would be just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
repetitive. She said, no, you guys own it, you paid for it, so it's your document to work with. So yeah, I think it's a lot of reorganization, cleaning it up, making it readable. There are tidbits that are really redundant and repetitive, and but also taking the next step, implementing the wildlife action plan mapping, where they have mapping for high ecological value areas. They have data on, like, if we had thinking about like trails too.
So, I'm thinking as a manager, if you spend all this time working on this, is this something that will be, so we've got this great document afterwards, but is it something that's going to be utilized and implemented any more than it currently is?
now, isn't something that they're asking for in the updating of some of their land use and stuff like that as they're working through,
They,
once again, another preview or review of our master plan and some of the stuff that never got done in 2017. So I'd say that they're looking for this information in an updated way.
they meaning
The
the,
city.
The city,
okay.
Yeah, the master plan needs.
Planning.
needs
Yep.
an update
you
as
know the
well,
people,
so,
you work with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Okay,
and
okay.
talking with Amanda too, she's like, really, the NRI, the master plan is like easier to read version of the NRI. Like, if you want all the good meat and potatoes of it, the NRI is the place where it's really gonna
The
be
technical part of it,
detailed,
okay.
technical, but the master plan, I can't do the master plan until I do the NRI, so I'm
Gotcha.
gonna be busy over the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I
Why
just,
we hire the youth of America, they have a lot extra energy.
I
I
think one of the more challenging things, it's hard to say because I haven't fully dove into it, so it may be easier, prove to be easier than I'm working up in my head, but implementing climate change. And Amanda had said that we can stay rather general and just say like concepts of, okay, as temperatures rise and we're experiencing less ice out, ice in period, lakes are gonna get warmer, and then increase of Eurasian milfoil and other invasive species because more sunlight. And so she said it's not so much about like, yes, we do want good hard data, but also implementing the broader high-level concepts of what the lakes region is going to see in terms of climate change. And there are 2 regional studies, but it cuts the state in half. Basically, it's like lower and upper, and I'm like, where are we? We're the lakes region.
We're
So,
right in
and
the
I think
middle.
actually, I think there's a third. I think there's a sea coast. So it's kind of trying to find like where exactly the lakes region falls in between those, because I don't think that there's anything really out there that's specific to what the impacts will be just for the lakes region. It's more broad. It just says New Hampshire. Okay, we're going to experience more precipitation, most likely, which is
And-
nice because we won't be fighting over water. It seems like we got plenty of it, but
Well, species change, our agricultural cycle has
Yeah.
shifted, and they're not syncing up with the wildlife, you know, and, so, I mean, that's the kind of studies I think maybe she's
Zone
opening
three
up for.
versus zone 4.
yeah,
And-
and maybe that'll be
I didn't
good
hear you.
because maybe it won't be so specific, so it's just the state and they can kind of meld it to what we expect to see.
Mm.
It's a little hard to say, so I'm not, those will be the main changes, really focusing on reader friendliness and cutting out some of the jibber jabber.
In the master plan.
In,
In the
NRI.
NRI.
Oh,
Which they contribute to the,
ease of reading, I guess I think you
Yeah.
meant the
master plan will
master
be
plan.
even easier than the NRI, but
Yeah,
the
okay.
NRI will be detailed, it's just
That's right,
the
okay.
level of detail, like,
And-
it's, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is that I talked to some consultants and other, I talked to Meredith and Guilford to see how they did their NRIs. And they're typically, and I talked to a man from VHB, the consulting company, and the way they do it is they do it in 2 phases. The first phase is phase 1, and that essentially takes existing information that you can get off the web from like Granite, and you overlay and you make sandwiches, and then you see where there are co-occurrences of activities, wetlands and roads and things like that. And then you do a phase 2 on those areas where there are co-occurrences, because they're more important than the ones that just have, you know, one occurrence.
And
And-
something, oh, sorry, Dean.
And the phase 1 would cost about $5,000 to $10,000. And that would be, you know, that's what we talked about doing in-house. Because the information's on the web, somebody's just gonna get it and they're gonna make sandwiches, and we can make sandwiches and look at it and say, oh yeah, we see where these things are co-occurrences. And the phase 2 could be $20,000, $30,000. So rather than spend that money, start doing it in-house.
And just to be clear, I'm confident in my position, I'm not going to say that I know how to do absolutely everything, so I'm not going to just hand something out that I, like, pulled together in a day. I am probably my biggest critic, and if there's something that I'm not confident on, I'm gonna say straight up, I don't know how to do that, and we need to find an external source to pay to do that, because that is outside of my wheelhouse with, in terms of like updating the mapping that we have on our, database, the Access GIS site, the assessing site. If we were going to update those layers, then, we're gonna see if Paul Eschultz from DPW, he does all the DPW GPS GIS work, over there, so we'll see what he's able to do in terms of mapping on that front, and, cause that's not really my strong suit. I have taken GIS, I'm familiar with it, I'm not about to claim that I'm an expert, it's just not.
So, the only, it's not, I'm not gonna say that we have to, the only thing that I would say that I might have a comment on if I was sitting in the audience is, oh, you did your own NRI, huh? So you can kind of put anything you want in that, huh? I'm just playing devil's advocate, if I were sitting in the audience, I'd be like, you did your own? I don't know if I trust it. Should have been a third party doing it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and Dean had made that comment, and there are actually conservation commissions around the state who do their own NRIs. It just takes, I mean, as you can imagine, trying to get through some of the working documents that we've worked on over the time that I've been here, it's a lengthy process, and it's certainly different than if you were to pay someone to do the job, although it seemed like the last NRI took like a year and a half anyways to get that done. So, I think that our solution when we discussed that was making sure that it's working with, LRPC and the Lake Region Planning Committee and BCCD, and saying, like, a third party to say, here's what we have, what do you think? Are there areas that we need to strengthen, things that you'd like, didn't like, and making sure that third parties are reviewing it to say, like, I don't know, can you double check this?
Yeah.
And get some other eyes on it, because, yeah, like I said,
So
we
to
want
your
other
point,
input from other communities as well, so.
So,
But there's nothing that says, like, you have to pay 10 grand to go
No.
out and do an NRI.
No, and I wouldn't want.
And like Dean said, the phase ones really are just visiting X, Y, and Z site to pull the national wetlands inventory, to pull the different, geomorphic and topology and all that stuff, so it's the preliminary stuff, so I
going
don't
open
think,
source.
I think paying, it's up to, you know, further discussion, but in terms of if we want to have some major takeaways from the NRI and like tangible projects that could be implemented, or say, where could we best spend this money to have more, what do we need to know more about? Whether it's identifying a prime wetland or a scenic road, something that'll really add value, rather than just having data and having it sit in a plan. I love data, it's really good to have, but what can we do with it?
Well, that's why I was asking, is it?
Yeah, and that was, I mean, the current NRI does have little tidbits of suggestions that they make, they do have recommendations, but
so when you update this NRI, are we gonna, can you make sure to keep a copy of the original?
oh yeah,
The
the
way it is.
original, I'm not,
Just so that if we ever do want that
Yeah.
quirky information, we might be able to find it?
yeah, I'm planning to, I have to see if I can even get this in a Word format, because it's PDF, and converting a PDF to a Word, if anyone has ever done that, is a nightmare, so I don't plan, the original 2009 will always be in place. I'm planning to just reference it in the very beginning and state that this is an updated version of that copy. It'll always be made available, so.
Sounded like some of the,
2009?
Yeah.
Yep.
sounded
Oh
like,
my,
Time sure flies when you're having a good time,
sounds
Mike.
like some of that quirky data might end up in the master plan.
Well,
I don't know.
I think that the biggest concern that I have is that, you know, this is not Ashley's only assignment.
I know.
And
I
so
know.
Ashley and Dean and I talked about this, and I asked them, where does this fit in the list of priorities for her? And I think that's a work in progress.
No vacation for you.
I just took a couple days, I guess that's all I get.
oh, you'll pay for that.
But I think that the other thing that I would like to see is have the NRI be more of a working document. So when we have somebody like Holmesy come in and his wetland scientist says, these are vernal pools, that we put that information into the NRI, and so that we can kind of keep track as we go along and we gather more information about the city, we can keep it handy.
Does the Wildlife Action Plan allow for like citizen science for updating input into it? I don't remember.
The Wildlife Action Plan?
Yeah,
I
well,
think they're undergoing a revision, actually, I think this year,
okay,
because it was implemented in 2015.
yeah.
I think they're undergoing some changes. I can look more into it. though.
I was just wondering, to Dean's point, I was just wondering, is that as we learn things, how do we get it documented so it doesn't become
Mm.
forgotten?
Yeah, it's a good point. And the wildlife action plans, while they give a good broad overview because they're using like radar and different overlays to figure out, for the entire state to say, okay, everything in hot pink is high priority, and then green is a valuable, or I think it's labeled as the highest biological region rated in the region, and then the yellow is a supporting landscape, so they use different overlays to give a broad overview, but it's not on the ground verified. So, well, I think it's really good information to have and to incorporate because we don't have that incorporated into our NRI. I think it could give valuable insight into, again, like, if we were to spend money to do another study to add as an appendices and amend the NRI and keep it up to date and say, hey, we now have this information, we now know that there's a vernal pool here, and to your point, like seeing it, I know that DES, if you identify a vernal pool, can be sent to them. You like fill out a log and you send it to them. I don't really know what they do with it, to be honest, but.
I think we need to be, we need to take care of ourselves. I don't think we can rely on the state to do it for us. We get information about a vernal pool, send it to them, but we need to put it in our NRI so we know it's there. So it's, anyway, okay. So what's the next step on the NRI?
I attached to the agenda a preliminary outline. What I should have also done was attach the current outline, which is very wordy. Basically, the existing outline, it doesn't have subsets under each section. It literally is just straight down the line. And we can certainly revisit this. This is preliminary, and I do expect I kind of grappled with the topography and geology section. I really think that once I'm in it and reorganizing and putting things in their place, that this may change. I feel like it was hard for me not to put water first because Laconia is so water oriented. And there's nothing to say that we can't put it first. It was more of just looking at what other municipalities have in terms of their very first NRI.
You gotta have the structure in order to hold the water in,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Go with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's true.
We have peatland?
Yes. Yep. So that
Wow.
wildlife and habitats, section 3.4, all of that. I mean, 3.4.1, that's all new. The wildlife action plan habitats, the tiers are new, and the current NRI does go into, very briefly. I think there's a paragraph in there about non-native invasive species, and there's also the rare list, which is obviously updated since 2009. They updated it last year, so. I think as I mentioned before, we have a cultural section right now, but we don't have a historic. The very first, 3 pages focuses on the very early history of the city
About the Native Americans.
with the Native Americans, and so I think that needs to go further down with the cultural
Pesky
stuff.
aqueduct.
It's important. I'm not gonna
It
say
is
it's not
important.
important, but
It is.
is it so important that we don't
That you
talk
open
about
with
what
it.
an NRI is first?
Right.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't we, does anybody have any initial reactions to this outline?
No, it's a lot of work, God love you, and it looks good.
Thank you. If anyone wants a little day job, anyone want to take a section? Any takers? Dean, you look like you really want section 3.1. I'm just kidding.
If I was gonna do 3.1, it would go at the back end of the report, because it ain't changing. Except for some erosion.
Except for probably some grammatical errors.
Well,
I feel bad for ragging on them about the grammatical stuff. It's
That's
really
okay.
not.
No,
It's
no.
not that
You know,
big a
it's
deal,
even
but for
wor-
me, when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, come on.
It's even worse, Dean typed it, if you could quit getting on him.
it's all about communications. We're scientists, we're just trying to communicate. You get the point, because I didn't use proper English and grammar and blah, 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 that's not relevant. I mean, really.
I do feel like the communication about natural resources is my strong suit because that's what my degree is. It's environmental studies. And while I do have the background and the knowledge of the science piece, I'm not so thick into the science that I can't work a technical document, like, and make it readable. So I think that's why I won't shut up about it, is that, like,
Well, no, I mean, I know, I'm looking at your progressions of your natural resources, and it makes sense to me. So I think you did a fine job in terms of how you structured it and what that progression was, and so,
So I have a suggestion. Let's go with this
yep,
outline. And when we get it prepared and we read it and we think that something should be reorganized, we can do it then. But right now,
yeah.
we gotta have some bones to put stuff
I
on.
figured I'm just gonna take off little bites at a time, and I'll throw a section and say, here's what I got so far, look at that, and I'll start working on the others. And I think that, like I said, a lot of these, the main message, like geology, I don't think the bedrock geology isn't gonna change. It's more of just making it neat and clean and easy to convey, and, while still maintaining detail, not sacrificing detail, but.
so I'm just kind of wondering, you're trying to farm some of this stuff out, and I'm just kind of weighing it for you. If you could get an intern, or you could farm some of it out, do you then lose the consistency of what you're hoping to do? And I'm just wondering if that's, I mean, because I can start asking around if there's somebody who might be interested in helping you with this, but I also don't want to create an issue where it's like, oh, God,
You have to
now
redo it.
now I've got somebody who does things slightly differently, and it's not my voice, and
Yeah.
so you don't have to answer me tonight,
Okay.
but,
I'll have to think about it because, well, I do think it'd be helpful because some of this information is out for anyone to really get.
yeah.
I think, like you said, the digestion of it and putting it out on paper, if it's coming from multiple voices, it might read a little weird. So then I have like the task of also editing what that person like then wrote, but that's a good point. I
Just think about it and
Yeah.
let me know, because I can ask around if you
It's
want
like
me to.
what we
And
could do
I-
on the
I
boat
do
ramp
think-
this summer.
Yeah, there you go.
In the summertime, when things start picking up and I'm like out on Paugus Bay, out doing drip sampling, doing my BMP inspections, reviewing applications, reviewing violations.
We could take turns
I'm gonna be-
Ashley, I'm driving today, you read this section.
Yeah, I'll be like, oh.
No, Dean,
yeah.
I'm driving today, you read this section.
Like, NRI.
Okay,
So, it'll be a task, for sure.
thank you.
Little bites,
Okay, all
little
I
bites
ask
at a
is-
time.
Be patient with me. But
Sure.
also, like,
Yeah.
your input's very valuable, so I appreciate it. If you guys find resources or say, hey, look, I saw this, I know this community's doing that. And the climate change piece, like I said, it seemed like from what Amanda said, there's no framework for me to really work off of in other NRIs with climate change, because it seems like those communities who wanna implement it are doing that update right now. And they don't have anything published for me to reference to see how they've done that and how they've accomplished that. So, if you see stuff pop up over the course of this update, please just.
You don't have that in here?
Huh?
You don't have that listed here?
So, while it's not listed as its own section, the
And
goal here is to implement climate change in each, not every single section, but where it's applicable under that resource. Rather than, because if we had one climate change section, it'd probably be ridiculously long. So
Keep
it's more of to
referencing.
say, here's this resource, here's how
Right.
climate change is gonna impact that, here's what we can do about it.
I have a suggestion. Lisa sent me an article about a professor up at Plymouth State
I did see that too.
who is starting it's a degree in climate change. Maybe we could ask him at least to review when we have the climate change things. We also could ask him if he has stuff that we could use now, so we don't start with a blank piece of paper. I don't know, we don't
I
need
know
to,
they're out of Plymouth. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean, because at Plymouth State University, and they have the climate science major now, which is
Right,
really good.
yeah.
But I would think that, I mean, it's New Hampshire, we're a very small state, I can't go to any conference without seeing, like,
Yeah.
someone else in the field, which is
Right.
interesting and nice. But yeah, that's an idea. I think having different third-party people, maybe he teaches a class and he can have his students review it and tear it apart and make me cry. It's fine. And
Okay. Thank you, Ashley.
Great start.
Yep. Okay, so Winnisquam Watershed Network. Got a grant, doing a management plan. It's currently being worked on,
How big is their grant?
$80,000.
That's pretty nice.
$80,000, and they got an additional,
I think it was,
20, right?
yeah, about that, a little less. So-
So they're working on it. And Lisa Eggleston and Barbara Richter from NHACC had a meeting with all of the conservation commissions represented, with the exception of Samberton. And I sent Brad Crosby, who is on the Conservation Commission there, an email asking him if they were going to be involved. Actually, I asked him if he was going to be involved, and I haven't heard anything from him, so when I hear something, but,
I just wanted to clarify why I laughed. I've just, so many of the members of the group are already from Samberton anyway, so that was, I guess that's why I laughed.
well, I know, but still.
It should have been the
We're-
Conservation Commission, you're
Yeah.
right, you're right.
So anyway, so we're doing that. Okay, so it's 13 minutes of 8. So, Stacy,
So
you've listened long enough, thank you.
there's a trend
Uh-oh.
that seems to be happening. Just so you guys are aware,
In planning?
yep,
Okay.
there were a lot of questions about stuff that you guys had approved. And basically, the question is, why aren't the mansions being asked to be smaller, to fit? So that,
Hello,
Yeah.
hello,
So
gonna
that-
raise my hand.
so that there are no reasons.
Right.
Wait a minute, can you say that again?
So for example, Carriage Lane, that actually got 3 votes of no, because they felt that the homeowners were trying to put a mansion on a postage stamp,
You mean the one up at,
Southdown,
Or-
Long Bay.
No,
Long Bay?
Yeah.
Excellent, I didn't know that. Hello.
So then the trend came for, there was another home where, again, it was, why isn't it just being smaller? Just,
Gilman
Nope.
Street.
was it, okay.
Gilman Street.
And it did come up here
And-
also.
Oh, yeah.
Mike,
Yeah, I said, well, and I was about the garage, which,
then
So.
again, I don't think,
So my first thought, when I saw the 4 buildings, if he had eliminated building number 3, he wouldn't even be here.
Well,
But it
Last-
has to make financial sense.
but
It's
here
less
it
than
is.
12.
Last night at zoning, and it hit zoning before it hit here. My particular question was on the south side for unit 3 and 4, why can't they rotate it? It's a picture
Right.
on a piece of paper, and this is the thing that got me out at Carriage Lane. This isn't a built house, this isn't an ad thing.
Right.
Go back to the guy who's making the picture and make it better. Oh, can't do that. It's a picture, it's on a program, it's not that hard. And I buy right into what we're looking at here.
So it does seem to be a trend that they understand that there are no more developable plots. Everything that's gonna be coming forward
Yeah.
from now on is gonna have to have some sort of detail scrutinized. And they're just like, Does it have to be this big?
And I think, I want to say, in my mind anyway, that's more their job than ours. I mean, I
Well, they
would never
felt
consider
that-
saying that because I just don't, I mean, I might not approve of the plan.
They felt
But-
that because you guys had approved it, they wanted to back you up. And
Oh,
No, that's not their job. That's not their job. Seriously, it's not their job.
I mean,
Our
they're the ones
job-
with the teeth.
Our
We
job
have-
is,
You
go
know,
ahead.
I'm
I
sorry.
think they wanted to give you some teeth.
Well, we'll take it.
They
if we
wanted to
can.
give us what?
Some teeth.
Because we don't
So-
really,
They didn't want you guys to get shut down in front of the applicant. They really did not.
Okay, so I've had this conversation with the chairman about giving us teeth. We have, and all we've done is talk about it. So in terms of, somebody comes in with a lot, and they say, here's my lot, and, you know, here are the setbacks, and I want to put in a building this big. We ask the questions, why?
Right.
It's like, why? These guys are building 4 units, the ones that were here tonight, $400,000 plus.
well, that's,
We don't care what it costs.
that's
No,
right.
no. I do care what it costs.
But it's not the Conservation Commission's concern.
Exactly the point. But, so we can't say to them, build it smaller and sell it for an affordable price. Affordable price, what is that? I don't know, whatever a teacher can afford. That's an affordable price.
Yeah, good luck.
Right? And they're not gonna build it. They're not gonna build because they don't make enough money.
they're not building for us, they're building for out-of-staters.
That's exactly right. So you're asking us, so if the,
Oh, I'm not asking anything.
no, I'm
just telling
saying
you
if,
the trend.
if the trend is to have us ask them to reduce the size, we do, but we're looking at natural resources, we're not looking at, you know, the size.
Well,
So he's got this,
so
he's got
you
this.
are mainly looking at the impact that those buildings have on the environment, and if you feel that the impact is good, the planning board is taking your word for it.
Well,
Here's the footprint, you know, we're gonna stay in the footprint, but we're gonna make it 6 floors high.
yeah,
Jesus.
Okay, we have no say over that, it's not ours, that's the planning
That'd be
board.
zoning,
The,
wouldn't
pl-
it?
no,
The
no,
height?
I know, but the planning board should look at that and say, 6 stories is not reasonable. No.
or here,
Go to the zoning board.
there's no definition for a size of a unit, which I
You
said
mentioned,
here.
yeah.
Now, last night, I was like, boy, this is going to go in front of conservation. I can guarantee you that they're going to ask you about turning this way, this and that. They're going to have some questions on that. Recognizing when I called up today, after an ill sleep of saying what it was, recognizing that our new, soon-to-be updated things does take into account the size of the wetlands that you're impacting, instead of having an automatic setback. What we're looking at here in zoning and planning is infill into some of these pieces of property which are not currently built on. As conservation thing, I say infill is great, so we don't have to start carving up 260 pieces, acre pieces of land to build tiny houses.
And I'm less concerned about the size of the wetland and more concerned about the quality of the wetland.
There you go.
So I don't care if the wetland is 200 square feet. If it's a vernal pool, it's a vernal pool. And that's more important than, some puddle out in the woods.
Like the ones tonight were probably man-made when when it was first developed the first time.
It's just a difficult terrain on it. It is part of the, heaven forbid,
But-
topography of our area.
So,
So
it sounds like,
So if the planning board wants us to comment and not necessarily approve an application because of the size of the building, we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that.
I think that they're more so, because this was the first planning board meeting I had actually sat entirely through, and it was a good one, because a lot of these CUPs that I had seen you guys
Right.
comment on had gone to planning board, so, I think that because the overall recommendation was to support, but you have X, Y, and Z as conditions, they kind of take, it's not that you guys didn't recommend to move the garage forward at Gilman Street. That was the recommendation. The applicant made that amendment to his plan for planning board. He did move it forward. So I think that it's more of the big picture that if you had motioned to deny it, potentially it would have swayed them at the planning board level when they were reviewing it, because Conservation Commission denied it rather than approving it. And I know that it's a proposal by proposal basis, so
Somebody actually mentioned if it had been stopped here, it wouldn't have even gotten to planning.
Right.
but I know that
That's
you
not
guys,
what I was told last night.
and you guys have seen
No.
instances where you've denied it and they've approved it, so I know that it's probably frustrating to hear that, well, you guys approved it, and then you hear that it was like a 3 to.
Yes.
I would say the most egregious of that is Mr. Homsey with that piece over there, that time and time again. And the guy comes up and he figures that, I don't know, in some weird world, if he just keeps talking at us, saying the same thing and not coming up with anything else, that we're going to crawl under the table with our hands over our heads and say, just do it, just do it, just do it. Which is why I resisted so much, because I cannot take that sort of activity, you know. You give him the recommendations, you're saying what it is, and yet he declines to do it, so he takes it to planning, and finally here, we're like, oh, geez, just go. Planning says, oh, geez, just do it for this guy and get him out of here. And that's egregious.
So I have a question, and does it make sense? Does it make sense to have a joint meeting of the planning board and us to talk about specific examples? So not say, well, if you think it's too big, then tell us and we'll, specific examples. Let's take this project and look at it. And planning board, what would you like to have seen us comment on?
They would have liked to have seen you suggest to the applicant, why can't you make it smaller?
Mike did.
Fit.
Mike did.
Right, and I didn't mean to be obnoxious about it, but what I was trying to say is, why don't you just make it smaller? Well,
But while he did make that recommendation on Carriage Lane, it wasn't echoed by the rest, so it was not added as a condition or recommendation towards that went to the planning board for that application.
Okay,
Well, so,
Okay.
If it was unanimously or had a majority vote, it would have been added to.
And I guess I never thought that was part of our,
well, and I'll be honest with you, I feel like we've gotten our hands slapped enough times that the messages were pro-development and don't stand in their way unless it's really, really important. And, they're just advisory anyway, so don't make it too difficult for them, I mean, that's kind of the message I feel I've got.
I don't think you should denigrate the value of this board right here. I think
I don't.
each of us in the conservation board, are committed to certain ways of the use of our land.
And that's how I approach this, but I guess what I'm telling you is, when I come in here every meeting and sit down, it's always in the back of my mind is that I feel like the city has told me, we're very pro-development and don't make it too hard for anybody. And I pick my battles. And when I speak up, and like tonight, I kept saying, I'm ruminating on this vegetation because that was really important to me, rather than another point that, okay, maybe I don't need to be hard on this one. So I'm just saying, it's good for me to hear this, because
I think you are respected, yes.
I would say, I mean, I can't speak for, like, as I said, this was the first in full soup to nuts meeting I sat through, and I know that the board changes, the attitude changes over the
Yeah.
years, but they seem to have nothing but, like, the utmost respect for what you guys do. They said that, well, Concom said this, so we should trust them with their opinions and their suggestions, so.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so maybe there's, okay, so I'll give you an example. If you're really asking me for my opinion on a project that we looked at tonight, I'll give you my opinion on the Pearly Pond. Leave it alone.
That, I think there's a legal thing.
Leave it alone. No, wait a minute. No. Leave it alone, because what's gonna happen with that pond is what happens with every single pond from an ecological standpoint. It will fill in, it will disappear, period. That's it. It happens all the time.
And legally, we can't do that.
Okay, but no, wait a minute, no. Our legal responsibility is to maintain it, so we keep the garbage picked up, we mow the lawn, we take care of the tree as best we can. And when it comes to trimming all the vegetation along the road, we don't think that that's really important. Because from an ecological standpoint, it's gonna grow back next year. And it's holding the soil in place. So I think it's like Lisa said, we need to pick our battles. So this is not a battle that we wanna, pick. And because we don't wanna pick this battle,
Right.
the project was taken away from us. Because the original approach was that we were supposed to do what was turned over to whomever.
Well,
But that's not the point. That's not the point. The-
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, it is the point. It's like what Lisa was saying, we've got to pick our battles.
and some of that is we don't have the tools. We don't have the lawnmowers. We don't have the crew. We don't have weed whackers. It's always nice to go out and imagine where we get this work done from, but in reality, it's Parks and Rec who has the tools and the wherewithal to be able to deal with it.
I'd like to revisit Dean's idea of, I think maybe you're doing a fantastic job in letting us know, and there's probably other things on your list we haven't let you get to yet. But I'm thinking that if once we finish your report, maybe putting it out there that we'd like to have some sort of joint get-together, maybe the back half of one of their meetings or something, or of the front half where we have just kind of that's,
Understanding of,
Honestly, what I would do is, because getting everybody to these meetings, I am finding, is just an act of God.
yeah,
So half the time, half of them are not there.
yeah.
We are lucky to get a quorum, but if you see an item on the agenda, you absolutely can call in, state who you are, and give your point of view.
Okay.
And that is far more effective, because these phone calls of people calling in, everybody is all ears. Because they know somebody is listening, and
Well-
they do pay attention to every
And that's calling
call.
into planning
Yes, during their meeting,
Okay, so,
during the meeting,
right,
So-
at that point on the agenda.
right.
yeah.
and to
Right.
that point, when Holmesy came in with his latest plan, and we made comments, I sent Stacy an email that night saying, these are the things I don't agree with that Holmesy is doing. And my understanding is that you presented those to the planning board.
And
Sure.
Dean did not want me to, so that letter should have gone to Dean. So
Go
I
through the
had
front
to-
door, not the back door.
I had to take your notes and portray them as mine.
Okay, but you know what, that's, okay, so that's another important
So
factor.
any email, though, that is written to the planning director
Public.
is read
To the
at that
planning
time.
director, not to the planning board. Because I wrote it to the planning board member who had been here.
Because it was in my email, it was to,
Okay.
emails
And
about stuff like that
I'm sorry if
are
I got you in
no-no.
trouble, I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
Oh, no, I was new to it, so
Okay.
it was, I didn't realize that was a no-no.
Okay,
It's
okay,
like if in a butter, because you're a resident as well. So if anyone writes into the planning email mailbox, but you can also email Dean, because he attends those meetings as staff, and say, I want this to be known at the meeting. If you don't want to attend in person or can't attend in person to represent your words, he can certainly read, you know, so-and-so has these comments.
okay, but there's a more general comment that I want to make, and that is, when we sit here and we make comments to the applicants, and I'll use Mike's comment about, can't you make that a smaller house? If when we get down to Ashley's reading, here are the comments we're gonna make, if anybody thinks that a comment that they made was not reflected in what Ashley just read to us, please stop right there and say, no, we need to ask them to review and to reduce. I think that that's really important.
In the instance of Gilman, or, Carriage Lane, where Mike wanted the house to be smaller, but that was not echoed and was not
Or,
a
or a
majority.
different shape.
What happened was the conditions and recommendations that everyone voted on went on to the memo that was provided to the planning board.
Right.
But the note that Mike had said, you wouldn't see that unless you go into the minutes of the meeting, or watched the meeting, or attended the meeting. Then you'd know, oh, okay, there was one person who felt this way.
When we do our motion, could we say in our motion, we'd like our suggestions to also reflect the objections of, you know, maybe of one of our, for these reasons? Could we include it in the motion to have it reflected in our suggestions?
I don't want to do it that way. I want it to be right up
Okay, well,
front.
I
I
was-
want it to be,
It's not that it
I
couldn't
want
be
it to
done,
be
it's-
part of
That's
the
fine.
list, the conditions.
I'm fine. I guess I was just trying to, if it ever comes up again, that,
It could just get mucky, because then what
Yeah.
if Deb says one thing, and then Mike says
Yeah.
one thing, and Dean
That's
says
fine.
one thing, and then you
Okay.
have three
That's
things
what the
that one person
discussion is,
wants.
and then the vote.
Right, so
Right.
it kind of,
Okay.
the main memo reflects the Conservation Commission as a whole,
right,
and then the nitty-gritty stuff, you gotta go into the minutes to find that, so.
yeah. No, I understand. I just was
Who's
trying
that
to.
guy? And I'm gonna go get him.
I just have two more quick things.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, we're holding you
I'm
up.
sorry.
I apologize, thank you for your
I
patience.
have to work in the morning.
Thank you
I'm
for
sorry.
your patience.
White Oaks Road, I just want to give you guys a heads up that got tabled because there's a whole lot of questions about drainage.
White Oaks Road.
They want to put 14 more RVs on that piece of property.
We haven't even seen that, have we?
Yeah.
Right, that's why
I
I'm just
have. I
telling
went
you.
looking for this, cause they told me I should start
So,
looking at
wait a minute,
that.
wait a minute,
It's
oh,
just
okay, down, on the
completely
downhill
downhill.
part, okay, I got you now.
So, that did get tabled because there are just way too many. I was glad I didn't have to say, hello, this is an issue. Layton Avenue, neighbors did call in about that. There are drainage problems, in the street, which I didn't have, when they were here. We didn't have any comments.
Is this across, is this
Come in.
this road that goes up
It's right on the corner,
to the
of,
garage, goes up to garage, a cart path?
yeah, there's a, so, in looking at this further, I was concerned, you know, I asked them, have you dug any test pits? He said, yes, we dug a test pit up at the top of the hill. I don't wanna know about test pit. I wanna know what's in the road. You're gonna put this road in, this driveway? I wanna know what's in the road. Cause if it's rock and you have to blast it, it's a different
Just-
game.
If I could just comment on that, so the abutters that had initially voiced concerns wrote into the planning inbox, the next day or later that night of the day that the applicant had come for the meeting here, they didn't know that the meeting was in person versus a Zoom platform, so they weren't able to join to voice their concern. But Dean and I went out in the field, had an on-site meeting with them, discussed their concerns, relayed several points that I believe were incorporated into the NOA in order to address the concern of like the vegetation on the northwest side facing the lake. Very steep area there. They proposed like pushing the forest line and potentially having a maintained lawn area. So we had made a recommendation to leave as much natural vegetation in that area to absorb the groundwater, prevent sheet flow runoff. And adding a drip edge around the house and having gutters not going again towards the road, towards that steep spot where the runoff, to prevent sheet flow and increased issues. We've seen over, a couple of years probably now, issues on Leeton Ave where sheet flow is coming off driveways, so it's definitely a concern that's on the radar of the city, on the radar of DPW as well, with addressing the swale out there, and culverts on the driveways on the eastern side of Leeton Ave. So they will have adequate drainage as well to catch anything that does come off that side of the property.
Right.
So,
And they were out there the city was out there for, a month, breaking up rock on that eastern side to create a swale, so that the water could move down the road.
right, and the culverts on some of those weren't adequately sized, so they had to resize
Right.
some of them, make sure the water's going the way
Right.
it's supposed to be going. So, the abutters did chime into the planning board meeting. We had met with them. We had made sure that their concerns were heard and incorporated into tangible actions into the plan.
So what happens if, in a case like this, the guy goes and he says, I'm gonna build my driveway on my neighbor's property, and he's giving me permission to do that. And they start digging, and they encounter rock. And now, like the guy they're building a house across the street from me. They had two machines out there breaking up rock for weeks, like maybe 6:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon, every day, except for Sunday and Saturday. So now we got, there's a precedent here, there's a lot of rock. So now the guy goes to build his driveway and he encounters rock. What's he gonna do? And it's right next to the pond.
So how does this tie in with the planning board? I'm sorry, I'm losing the.
Well, I've seen this before. I get what you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about, so, anyway, I'm sorry.
He just can't handle the jackhammering happening anymore.
No, I-
This is gonna be
He's
down the
like,
road,
"No more."
I guess what I was trying to say was that, so the planning board, and I know you want to get going, I'm just saying, so something like this with the planning board, now there's this complaint, it's been tabled, is that what you said it was, or was it denied?
No, the previous one got tabled.
This one was denied because of that?
This is White Oaks Road.
No, we're talking about Leighton Drive now, Leighton Ave. That was that tabled, or was that denied? Approved, it was approved.
Yeah,
Even with concerns on the water, okay,
They were addressed.
right,
Were
because
addressed.
everything got looked
Okay.
at.
okay. All right.
So White Oaks Road is
Tabled.
Tabled.
Tabled, yep.
Tabled until what?
And you probably might not even ever see it. I don't know.
What
Well,
was the address on that? You gotta,
It's where, it's.
I'll look it up.
It's the
Never mind,
trailer,
I'll
it's
look
the
it up.
trailer park right,
Okay, I know where it is. Never mind.
It's right
Never
next to
mind.
that
I know
old,
where it is. Never mind. I
surf
got it.
coaster.
I got it. I
So
got it.
there's
I
no
got it.
proposed wetland buffer impacts, so there's no wetland CUP. So it does
Oh,
not
yeah,
go
so you
before
guys wouldn't
Conservation
see it.
Commission.
but wait a minute,
It's like as if you had to review a boundary line adjustment. It's
No,
not-
what about runoff?
Right, this is what I'm talking about. This would be an example of where you would.
They had a lot
You
of
would be
questions.
notified, hey, this is gonna be coming up on the meeting. If you guys would like to offer anything to
Suggestion.
say, this is the time to do it during the public.
Yep.
So you can
hearing.
always see it by going to the planning board and downloading
have to look at their agenda.
Look at that. and it'll give you the full set of plans and stuff. I looked at that, I understand.
Is that why we never saw those apartments going in off of Providence Street?
Yeah,
Talking about Maple Street or something? Is that little Maple something?
no.
Oh, something.
They haven't come before
Those
planning
90
yet.
units?
I only watched it on
Oh,
zoning.
oh, by Hounsel? By Hounsel Ave?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
because that hasn't come up yet?
I just watched it on
Who
zoning.
approved?
No,
I thought they were
it went
approved.
through ZBA, and there are a lot of really good questions on it. And in some of the questions from doing a site walk earlier and then going to it, they have city sewer and water, and it turned out they were able to come to a resolution with the city which made the entrances better and reduced the amount of traffic within the neighborhoods.
So
And so it was approved.
are they gonna have two entrances now?
Yeah, one will go out to Growth Drive, which goes out to Hounsel Ave, and the other one down on to Providence
Providence.
Street.
Because
So
you can't
That
have
should be the
90
emergency
No.
one.
is the,
And
That was gonna be the
however
main-
was approved there, you know, or a one-way like an in, but not now, I don't know.
is the one by Growth Drive by the dog park?
Yes.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
but I mean,
but that's owned by the city of Laconia and it's
there's no
there.
wetlands over there or
What's
anything?
that?
There's no wetlands over there or anything?
It's what you're gonna
It's a
have.
sand pit.
The sand pit
It's a
that's
s-
been recovered by the stuff that was dug out of the diggings from over at Mountain View Yacht Club. And so for years, it was a sand pit and what adults would call an attractive nuisance. We used to call it a place to go four-wheeling and drink. And so,
The city takes their snow
and
there.
and now that it's been brought to
it's-
this, it reduces the amount of pesky activity that may go on over there.
So it's city water and sewer?
Yeah.
Or it will increase it because there's going to be an awful lot of tenants.
Yeah, way too many.
Hey, I lived in, when I was in the US Navy, I lived in an apartment complex just like that.
I did too.
And, you know, it was called living, two people, going to a job, coming home, paying your bill, and having enough money left over to put in the bank and have some to buy a car too. And
I don't know.
that is what a lot of the people who are members of this community do not get anymore.
So that,
Okay, so I just have, in a case like White Oaks Road, can the planning board
the dog park's
or the
gone.
zoning board of appeals say, we want you to go to the Conservation Commission, or we want the Conservation Commission's comments on this project, please. No permits are required, but we have natural resources that are gonna be impacted because we have water runoff, we have this, we have this, we have this. Why can't we do that?
Know the answer.
So my understanding is if they request it, yes. But just because an application was submitted, doesn't mean it always comes to Conservation Commission. Those
No.
concerns have to come up, and it has to be like, okay, we want definitely for Conservation Commission to weigh in. You guys will always see conditional use permits for wetland impacts, shoreline front properties that are gonna have
Right, yeah,
impacts, but
I know that, but what I'm saying
but
is,
your agenda would be stacked.
so,
Right.
so the thing that's good is that we have you as a liaison to the planning board, and you to the zoning board of appeals
Adjustment.
Well,
adjustment.
You don't always
on
get an
Province
appeal.
Road, there is a building for storage that is proposed. It is going to be 150 feet from Durkee Brook. I was the only one that said no.
Oh, wait, no, wait a minute.
Province
A
Road,
Durkee
that's
Brook,
107.
Okay, so wait a minute, we gotta take a
To
step
me,
back.
Durkee Brook is just
That-
hands off and
The city went to replace the bridge over Durkee Brook and had to stop, because when they were drilling down, to put the
Oh, yeah.
water line, they encountered contaminated water. So,
So now we're gonna put a building.
no, we
100
can't.
feet from
We
it.
can't.
It got approved.
That ship
Then,
has sailed.
then we have to object.
So,
So Ashley, I'd like to see who the abutters are to that, because I don't know that the dog park was ever notified. Because I'm on the dog park board. I don't know that any of
I'm
us were.
sure it was,
I-
because
well-
it was all over the,
It was in the newspaper, and we were thinking about maybe going to the developer saying, would you like to help sponsor the park and all that. I don't know that anybody knew that that was gonna cut through the area where the dog park is, because we've been talking about.
Below the dog park, not impacting the dog
You said
park.
out to Growth Road. How are they gonna get to Growth Road?
Right to the woods.
Yeah, the dog park is right there at the end of
Not
that.
at the circle, cause when I look at it,
Yeah, I
on
think
the
it's
thing,
up
there's a circle, and then Growth Road. Now, I'm ignorant, cause I've never been there. But it seems to be below where people go out into that section of land.
By the stamping technologies and
Yeah.
Cisco.
I think what's gonna happen is people in the building are gonna actually be able to look down and see the dog park. I think it'll be that type of visual, but I don't think that's gonna link up to that existing road.
Okay, well, I was just saying, as a board member of that particular facility, which is heavily utilized, and we were thinking of expanding maybe even.
Sorry,
So-
are we on the provincial, of the apartments, or which?
Yeah,
part?
Yes,
we're off,
we are.
we're off the rails.
We flipped back.
Yeah, we're all over the place, I'm sorry, and I just wanted to jump on that, and I know
Okay.
Dean was still talking about White Oaks Road.
All I can say is that we send certified mailings to all the direct abutters and the person across the street, and I will double check the mailing list on the
The city sends them out?
yes,
Really?
the abutter,
'Cause it's city land.
The abutter pays for it.
$10 in a butter, and we send out the notification.
Okay,
Yeah.
because when I had to get my CUP for my infamous porch, I had to send out 148 letters to
They're
abutters.
the landowner,
I had to do it.
they're the landowner.
Who is?
Well, the
City of
process
Laconia.
is different too now.
Oh.
Okay, anyway, it
The
doesn't make any
notice is
difference.
checked by
Okay.
assessing, provided
Okay.
to us, we send
Thank you,
them.
Stacy. When-
You're welcome.
All right. Geez, who knew we could grind up another
Sure.
hour?
Well, I have one other small bit of business. I want to know how vegetation on city property keeps diminishing and diminishing. That poor plant.
So I have a serious
I thought it
serious
was
thing.
looking good the other day.
The Kiwanis Club is looking for projects, environmental kinds of projects that the Laconia High School Key Club could do. We've
Nice.
worked with them before, and they're looking for projects again. So,
Like a plant irises.
Who is, I'm sorry, just for the record.
Like that?
Key Club.
the Key Club, and no, the Kiwanis Club,
Hold on.
the Kiwan, you know?
And Key
K-
Club's a
KIW.
junior, it's a,
I'm sorry, what?
NIS.
And the little kid, or the younger people's organization is called the Key Club, Key.
They're looking for volunteers?
They're looking
looking for
for
projects.
projects that they can volunteer on.
when I was in Key Club, we, painted the junior high school interior. We all got
They
together
did a
and did
rain
that.
garden at Tardif Park.
Right,
Yeah, stuff
and,
like
and
that.
we were looking to get some of those younger people to come help us on the commission. So, anyway,
I actually have a project. I didn't want to bring it up tonight because I haven't really formed it, but we have a volunteer coordinator now, the Conservation District, the Belknap
Cool.
County Conservation District, we have a volunteer coordinator. And I spoke to Ashley about implementing a pet waste pickup campaign. And we were talking about getting volunteers to do the pamphlets and fold them. And so anyway, I had talked to her, but that may be something that we could get the Key Club involved into. Spreading the word and hitting different.
okay, all right.
Does Ashley have any report?
Just a few things. The ordinance changes were approved by planning board at their last meeting. They're going to city council on February 22nd. for the first reading, so I'll be doing a presentation at that meeting.
City council when?
22nd.
22nd at 7 PM, and then depending on how that goes, if they have any changes, if not, it'll go to the March 8th meeting, most likely, for a public hearing. So it's just a FYI on the current timeline of those proposed changes. And the only change that planning board had was adding language to the porta potty
Right.
to the 33 feet from.
Yep.
They just wanted to make it clear that it's
Thanks.
not just construction projects, that it applies to like any and all
Huh.
wetlands and water bodies. So say you have like a graduation party and you're renting a porta potty.
Right.
Anyway, so I fixed that language.
Important.
Marnie re-interviewed
It is.
at the last city council meeting, and Harrison Haas, who is the person who's
Oh.
interested in becoming a conservation commission member, interviewed as well. So their votes, the city council will vote on that at the 22nd.
Is that your friend or not?
No,
Is that what?
Her friend?
No, it's a,
I don't think my friend put in an app yet.
It's not the diver, is it?
This is,
yeah, he was the person that I mentioned at the last meeting, that we had someone kind of like anonymously.
that wanted
Apply,
to
yeah.
be an alternate, correct?
He applied for either a regular member or alternate position, and Marnie's the only position as a regular member that's up for reappointment, so. Yes?
How come we didn't find out about Mr. Haas before, like, specifically find out?
What do you mean? You found out as soon as I knew that he was going to interview. Yes, I told you at the last meeting.
No, no, you told us that he was gonna, but we didn't find out that it was Mr. Haas. it's
So
like
you can
it-
submit an application online for any of the boards, and you can request that your application isn't public information. I'm not sure what the rationale is for requesting that. It's not, it's a little checkbox that says, please don't let everyone in the city know my stuff. So
So you,
he requested that it wasn't public.
so we can't go into a non-public session and,
Is this somebody you know?
no, but there was an applicant at one point that was somebody that I didn't know, but somebody else on the board knew and said, or on the commission, and they essentially said it would not be a good fit.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Dean.
Okay. I mean, I didn't wanna release information that he had.
No,
explicitly
I don't
asked
want you to,
remain
I don't want you to do
confidential,
that.
So, but he interviewed publicly, so I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's.
Right.
So,
I saw his
and
resume.
I
He'll be
did-
good.
I have emailed him and been in contact with him and said, if you wanna attend a meeting before you have your interview, and I guess things came up in his schedule. So,
Yeah, he's lived in Laconia for 30 years. Good person.
aside from that, the Trails for People and Wildlife, they sent out you guys got a booklet like last year, it's from Fish and Game, and they talk about how to, if you wanna make a trail, how to do that in the best way for the environment based on the topography and the layout and minimal impact in terms of sound. So they, apparently we're going to have like a training on this, but it's not happening because of COVID, but they have a webinar online about everything about this Trails for People and Wildlife. It's on the Fish and Game website at wildnh.com/trails. I haven't yet been able to watch it myself, I just found out about it today, but it's like a 45-minute informational thing about trail making, so
Cool.
could be useful if we,
Where is that located?
it's the Fish and Game website,
All right.
so just a little.
Like
let's see.
trails.
That's all I had.
Thank you to both of you for hanging in
Yeah,
there.
thanks.
Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Anybody want to talk about anything? All in
Yes,
favor,
I
say
have
aye.
to do, but I won't.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh.
I'm sorry. No, it's, did you watch that documentary that